Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and in this video I'm going to talk about two Disney products I watched recently. Marvel's Deadpool and Wolverine, and Star Wars' The Acolyte. There'll be spoilers for both in this review, but if you want the spoiler-free version, The Acolyte is the stupidest thing I've maybe ever watched, and Deadpool and Wolverine was fun, but mediocre. To go into more detail, I'll start with The Acolyte. The premise of this show is that it's set some hundreds of years prior to the Phantom Menace, set during what I suppose people are referring to as the High Republic. Plot of the show is there are two girls. Something happened 10 years ago. That's about it. The show is probably the worst TV show I've ever watched all the way through. The production values are fine on that note, but the writing, the premise, the acting, I don't understand any of it. I don't understand who this show is for. I don't understand the motivation of the characters. I don't understand what the hell kind of message it's trying to give, either. But if I had to try and explain it, in a nutshell, some Jedi discover what they refer to as a vergence of the Force. They go to seek it out on a planet by waddling around with metal detectors. They then discover that it is, in fact, these two little girls who live with a cult of space witches. The Jedi and the witches disagree on how matters should be handled. A commotion breaks out, the sisters are separated, all the witches die, and the Jedi, for some reason, develop insane hyper guilt over this. 10 years later, the sisters reunite, and that's pretty much the whole show. It's like 1 hour's worth of content stretched out over like 5 hours? I don't know, something like that. Kind of like the Obi-Wan show, which was an hour's worth of content stretched over a whole season of like 6 episodes. So what's the focus of the show? You'd think it's about the sisters who are actually the same person, born of the Force, but they barely interact, and every time they do, it's with the absolute worst dynamics and dialogue. I'd love to tell you more about their characters, but I can't, because they aren't characters. They are written in very stiff, awkward ways. They have no personality, no character traits. I suppose you could say one of them kind of wanted to be a Jedi and the other one didn't, but that's not really a character, and that's also about it, other than describing what they look like. It doesn't help that the actor for the grown-up version of these girls is one of the worst performances I have ever seen, and that's including the voice acting in Dynasty Warriors 3. Because at least in Dynasty Warriors 3, I can kind of tell what emotions they're going for. But in The Acolyte, it's not even in a, oh, it's funny bad, like, I don't know, The Room. It's just awful. She has one expression for every emotion, and that isn't like a, oh, Jedi have control over their emotions, because one of them was the only one who had any Jedi training, and she ditched that. It's impossible to tell at any given time what the actor is trying to convey by looking at her face, because it's just a sort of blank mask most of the time. Sometimes she has a grimace, sometimes she opens her eyes a bit more, but that's it. Very good acting there. There are some okay actors in the show, which I only know because I've seen them in other things, but overall even they are let down by the writing. The main Jedi dude, Sol, never seen him in anything else before, so I could be wrong, but I get the feeling he doesn't speak English, because his lines come across a bit stiff. Now, I get the impression this guy is probably a good actor in his native language, but it's very hard to act well in a language you are not proficient with. Considering this dude is essentially the anchor of the entire show, getting him to deliver emotionally charged lines in language he doesn't really seem familiar with is a questionable decision. It's not a knock against the dude, as he seems to be one of the only people in the show actually trying. The main girl seems bored, like she doesn't even want to be there. Whilst I've never seen her in anything else, her performance in this is absolutely horrendous. The main bad guy was okay, but had very little to actually work with. See, again, what is the motivation of anyone in this show? What is the goal? Who is the show for? If it's a show set during the Jedi Age, when they were protectors of peace and justice or whatever, why are they bumbling cretins? Who are we supposed to be rooting for in this show? No one's really likable. Now, you can have morally grey characters, even if it doesn't make sense in a show like this, considering it's about the light side and the dark side, which are inherently good and evil. And don't start quoting me random Star Wars comics that exclaim otherwise. This isn't Star Trek. In fact, look at Andor. That's a show which features no Force users, and you have some moral ambiguity. More so than that, Andor actually has character motivations, a plot that makes sense. It tells us more about how the universe works, the day-to-day handling of sectors by the Empire. The Acolyte doesn't tell us anything. It's just a lot of loud noise and emotional moments. It's the sort of things that people write them and they think it sounds really cool, but actually no one ever talks like that, and no one would say these sorts of things. And when you actually think about the words, they don't mean anything. They just sound dramatic and emotional if you turn your brain off. Family is everything. And if we don't have family, what do we have? That's like the sort of writing this show has. It's just awful. I don't need to bother going into things about how the showrunners have no idea how fire works. Apparently, when oil is ignited, it doesn't get consumed by the fire. It actually multiplies and spreads, which is, that's good news for energy providers, I suppose. It can also burn in space, apparently. Or how it may or may not mess with Star Wars canon is, I don't really care about Star Wars canon. I checked out of Star Wars many years ago. I'm judging this not as a Star Wars show, just as a independent sci-fi adventure. Fails on all fronts, by and large. Most of all, characters. I found it hilarious how they built up a little squad of characters and then wiped out 90% of them halfway through the series, in what I'm sure they thought was a shocking, epic twist. Dang, I was so attached to buff shirtless dude and girl from Logan who is an alien. Hey, that makes a good segue, actually, because the girl from Logan is in Deadpool and Wolverine as well, which, despite being an irreverent, gross-out comedy, actually treated her with some respect, sort of. So Deadpool 3's plot is Deadpool needs to find Wolverine because otherwise his planet/universe is screwed. He eventually finds a bottom-of-the-barrel Wolverine who is sad, cause bad. They end up in the place from Loki, a sort of void, timeline dumpster for the multiverse, wherein they find dudes, they do stuff, they fight, plot things happen, and it ends. It's far more interesting to review Deadpool and Wolverine, though. See, it has a back and forth. A plus, film seems to be made from a genuine place of passion. Minus, comedy isn't my kind of thing. Most of the jokes are either just like gross things, and I don't really know how to describe it, but something to do with like masculinity or homosexuality. Like Deadpool sees a stun rod and he's like, haha, you gonna put that up my butt? I don't really understand how that's a joke, I suppose. But that's just me. I'm not going to hold it against the movie just because I don't find that kind of stuff funny. There are things that I find hilarious which are very immature and other people probably find dumb or maybe offensive. Comedy's weird like that, it's very subjective. Plus, Deadpool and Wolverine have pretty nice chemistry. Negative, the plot is kind of convoluted, as is standard with multiverse or time travel style plots. I don't think anyone's expecting high art from a Marvel movie, let alone a Deadpool movie. Although it had more of an emotional core than most of the Marvel things I've watched lately. It sets things up, it pays them off. There's a few poignant moments. Wolverine and Deadpool both develop, or at least they have clear motivations and clear goals. In fact, pretty much everyone in the movie has a clear goal you can lay out, for the most part, unlike, say, The Acolyte, where bad guy wants the girls because watch season 2. The girls want to find each other, yeah. Soul wants to find the girls because he stared at them when they were kids and he spoke to them for 5 minutes and now his life revolves around them. Deadpool, though, it's a fun movie. It's a popcorn movie. It succeeds at that for the most part. The action scenes are serviceable, even if most of them aren't super creative. The very first one's probably the most creative one. The cameos are a big part of the movie. Whilst they are fun, they've absolutely no meaning if you aren't familiar with comic book movies of the last decade or 3, but if you aren't, then why are you watching a Deadpool movie? Was I surprised and excited to see my favourite comic book movie character Blade show up? Of course I was. Does it make it a good movie because thing I liked was in it? Not necessarily. However, they worked the cameos into the plot well enough. They aren't just, pointless, oh, here is the thing that you know. Like how many movies and shows do it. It had a thematic resonance with the rest of the plot. Overall, Deadpool and Wolverine gets a thumbs up in the sense that if you like these kind of comic book movies and worlds, you'll probably enjoy it. The Acolyte, I don't know who I can suggest that to. If you're a fan of shirtless men, then there's like 2 scenes with that in it. Otherwise, the show has zero value unless you want to watch it with a friend, as I did, and laugh at how gosh darn bad it was. As for Deadpool, well, I hope this somehow leads to another Blade movie being made with Wesley Snipes, as frankly, he spoke the truth in the movie. There's only been one Blade, only ever gonna be one Blade.